HARK, we are here. It is time for another episode of Regroup Phase. We've got a lot of previews to go over, some really fun stuff, some leaders after my own heart. Very happy with the stuff that's come out this week. It's not Mandalorian stuff, but it's just as good. Nothing's going to be better than Mandalorians. So we've got stream preview, we've got social previews, we've got previews, we've got creator previews, lots of stuff to go over. Let's get right into it. Our first leader preview is not actually art we've seen before, but it is of a character whose art we've seen before. And this is a very interesting situation as it stands. I'm very hyped for this leader. Let's get right into it. We have here Kylo Ren, Rash, and Deadly. This is not the sleeve and soft crate art from GameGenic that we saw when they showcased us all the set 2 accessories that they're releasing. So that's interesting. Either that's the showcase art, or there's another Kylo Ren card coming in this set. But we have our rare aggression villainy leader here, which, by the way, I called it. Action: exhaust this leader, discard a card from your hand, give a unit +2/+0 for this phase. He's force and first order, yes. Epic action: if you control 4 or more resources, deploy this leader. He has a 5/4. That's IG-88 stats. Flip side, 4 cost, aggression villainy, yada yada, 5/4, force first order. This unit gets -1/-0 for each card in your hand. Kylo Ren is here to wreck fools, wreck faces, do some stuff. Tyler did specifically say that we were going to have a leader that dealt with discarding cards from the hand. That's what Kylo Ren does. There are several cards we're going to see in this week of previews that do mesh with this. I think the most interesting aspect is that while he is a 5/4/4/4, the unit itself gets -1/-0 for each card in your hand. So you have to decide when you're going to be able to do this and how many resources you're going to try to exhaust in order to be able to get this guy to be a 5/4 when he comes out. I think that Kylo Ren is not actually a leader that is going to often see the 4 resource deploy like Sabine does, because it is harder in the early game to be dumping those cards unless you're playing multiple units a turn and you're also using this effect. You have to make sure you don't run out of gas for yourself to be able to do things. So this might actually be a very heavy smuggle deck as well, because you want to remove cards from your hand, but you still want to be able to play cards in the game. So I'm very excited for this leader. I'm very excited for the first order trait, as it were. I think it's going to be really fun to see moving forward. There is another leader that is from this same series. We'll showcase that closer towards the end of the video. But Kylo Ren is here to stop blaster bolts and chop you with cross blade lightsabers. And that's really freaking cool. Our next 2 previews come by way of Late Night Gaming. Link to their video in the description below. You should check it out. It is very interesting. There's one card here that deals directly with Kylo Ren and one card that does not. So we're going to start with the Kylo Ren card first. We have here Kylo Ren's High Silencer, Ruthlessly Efficient. This is a 2-cost aggression villainy space unit, 3 power, 2 health, first order vehicle fighter. Action: if this unit was discarded from your hand or deck this phase, play it from your discard pile, paying its cost. This is a legendary, number 135 out of 262 in SHD. There's a little bit of speculation that this card was actually supposed to be a lower rarity because it does have the reminder text on it, and most legendaries don't. I'm not sure that I necessarily buy that in terms of the way this card changed. It's possible that they did this specifically to clarify because so many people had issues with cards like Energy Conversion Lab. But Kylo's TIE Silencer is here to blast things. If you discard it with your own leader effect, you can play it that same phase as long as you have the resource to be able to do so. If your opponent mills it off the top of the deck with something like Vigilance, same thing, or with Kanan Jarrus, which does happen, you can bring it back. Since it's a 2 cost, it doesn't really cost you all that much, and it is a 3 power fighter, which is really neat. And then on top of that, if your opponent discards it as a card randomly from your hand or selects it to be discarded, I don't know why you would, you can then that phase play it, unless obviously you don't have the resources. So that would be why your opponent would pick this specific card. But this card's going to see a lot of play. I think this card's going to see a lot of play just in general because it is a good aggression ability 2-cost 3 power fighter that can just deal the damage. You play it on your first round, and then your opponent has to deal with it by dealing the 2 damage. slamming another thing into it, but this will take basically any single unit that deploys on 1 or 2 cost. This will take out, and it does a big chunk of damage into things like the Millennium Falcon. So we'll see how this moves forward. I think this is a great card. I'm excited to be able to try to pull these. The TIE Silencer is here. Late Night Gaming's second preview is another card from the sequel trilogy, but doesn't directly really reference anything specific until potentially later. We have here the Rickety Quad Jumper. This is a 2-cost Vigilance space unit, 1 power, 3 health, fringe vehicle transport. On attack, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it is not a unit, give an experience token to another unit. This is a common, number 57 out of 262 in SHD. This is your Vigilance Greedo, but instead of dealing damage, it is, and when it's defeated, this is on attack, you can reveal and give an experience token. There is another card that is coming out that we'll see that deals with giving experience tokens and having units with specific power. But as it stands, I don't think this is going to see a lot of play outside of the limited environments draft and sealed, because it really doesn't do much. And at least you're not discarding, you are revealing it, so that's not a huge issue, and it does give you that top deck knowledge if you really want it. You can use that to manipulate what you're getting for smuggled resources, what you're getting for Han resources when you attack with the leader. There's a couple of different interesting strategies, but I think as a 1-3 for 2, it's on the lower side of usefulness. Again, much like Moisture Farmer, maybe we'll see someone abuse the heck out of this, and with a really cool deck type. Obviously, a lot of us didn't think that Vigilance was a good card right off the bat, and now, honestly, it's the first card I think that should be banned in the game, or at least limited to 1. That's a hot take for you. But Rickety Quad Jumper, at least the art is cool. It's a cool ship. We never really got to see this do anything, although there is an X-Wing version of this for that board game. I would be interested to see what somebody could do with this that would be significant enough to run it in a deck. Next up, we have 2 previews from SWU Harvest. Link in the description below. But we have 2 cards here. One that is definitely very much helped by Kylo Ren, or helps Kylo Ren, and another one that is just a really good card in Cunning. So let's start with the Kylo Ren card. We have here Migs Mayfeld, Triggerman, bang, bang, bang. Bill Burr is a TCG card, and that's awesome. 2 cost, aggression, ground unit, 2 power, 2 health, Underworld. When a player discards a card from their hand, you may deal 2 damage to a unit or base. Use this ability only once each round. This is a rare, number 163 out of 262 in SHD. This is an interesting card. You can drop it on round 1 and then prepare to be able to do discard shenanigans. Now, there's a couple of different things that actually really make this card very interesting. It's not when you discard a card. It's not when your opponent discards a card. It's when a player. So if you discard a card for Kylo Ren's effect, Migs is shooting something for 2 damage, whether it's a base or a unit. If you force your opponent to discard a card, Migs is going to do that. Now, this is only going to trigger once each round. So you're not going to be able to just discard, ping, 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 ping. But he is at least going to be able to get some level of damage out to be able to do things. And if your opponent doesn't have a Sentinel on the board, one of the easiest ways to trigger this off is round 1, play Migs. Round 2, discard a card from your hand for Kylo Ren's effect. Give this unit +2, and your opponent has to deal with it immediately or take 4 damage to the base, plus the 2 that they're taking from Migs' effect. So this is a very interesting card. I imagine this is going to get played a lot of. I'm wondering if you're going to see this in something like Sabine, that might be Sabine Cunning even, that might be running a little bit more discard control with things like Bodhi and Spark of Rebellion. And then K2SO also can discard a card instead of dealing 3 damage. You probably want 3 damage, but if it's the difference between winning the game and losing the game, and the discard card is going to help you at least not lose or get closer to winning, you're still dealing 2 damage to the opponent's base with Migs' effect. So it's a very interesting card. I think this is going to see a lot of play. It's also risky because it dies to a lot of easy things that will kill it, but it is also a threat that's on the board that has to be taken care of. Otherwise, it's going to get out of control. And if you've seen some of the games that I've played, sometimes leaving a unit on the board that gets out of control is really, really bad. Our second preview from SWU Harvest is a really good Cunning card. We have here Coruscant Dissident, a 3-cost Cunning Heroism ground unit, 3 power, 4 health, Underworld Twi'lek. On attack, you may ready a resource. Uncommon, number 199 out of 262 in SHD. Coruscant Dissident here is Ezra stats without the Force trait, but has the ability to ready a resource when you attack. This will be able to ready something that you use. You can combo this with Shoot First to get a very similar combo that Boba Fett has with his leader side ability, but we have other resource management shenanigans that you can do. Smuggle is obviously going to be one thing, so you could smuggle something, Coruscant Dissident, attack, get a resource back. You can combo this with Leia by being able to potentially play Leia, get your resource back, attack with the Coruscant Dissident, get that resource back, and then still be able to have 2 resources to be able to do other things in addition to whatever you want to do for that turn. This is a really good card. It has really good stats. The 4 health means that it's not going to be as easily taken out by 3 cost or less units. Obviously, it still dies to most pieces of removal, but, you know, honestly, that's an excuse for everything in the game. And the more targets your opponent has that they have to use removal on, the less that they're going to be able to do anything to your board later in the game when it comes down to having bigger units that need those same pieces of removal. So I like this card a lot. I think this is going to feature very heavily in decks that want to be able to continuously manipulate their resources, but also a 3 cost 3/4. Can't really ask for more, can you? On May 22nd, FFG put out an article showcasing a couple things about Shadows of the Galaxy. Link to that article in the description below. That article is referenced as part of the stream, which we'll talk a little bit later. But we got 2 previews in the article and 2 previews in the stream. So let's go over the article previews first. We have a new adventure, a 2 cost double cunning gambit event. Thank God this isn't a trick. Return a non-leader unit that costs 6 or less to its owner's hand. Then its owner may play it for free. This is an uncommon, number 207, I believe, out of 262 in SHD. I'll try to get a clearer number on the next card. This card is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Boba stonks through the roof. I know I'm a broken record at this point. I do genuinely feel like there's going to be a significant problem with that deck until we see something that's even more problematic. And then that's just an arms race of power creep, right? Power creep in set 2, really? Not really, more just that leader was super good right off the bat. Regardless, let's ignore the Boba problem. Let's take a look at a new adventure itself. A new adventure is actually a really interesting tool to do a couple of things. You can save your own unit from dying if it has damage and you know your opponent's going to attack or defeat it with damage in the next action. You can eliminate one of your opponent's units that has a bunch of upgrades on it. Sure, they get to play it for free, but those upgrades are no longer there. Obviously, non-leader unit, so you can't neuter a Chirrut with this, unfortunately. But it's still interesting for something like a 5th brother that's got stacked up experience tokens and a fallen lightsaber and some shields maybe, or the Mandalorians. And then you could also use this to replay a card that has a powerful when played effect, such as the Armorer. Armor is 5 cost, so it's less, and then you can end up putting the extra shields. So you could spend, if you do it right, you could spend a total of 9 resources to play the Armorer, get your when played, use a new adventure on your next action to take her back to your hand and play her immediately. And while that's super expensive, you also just potentially dropped up to 6 shields on units on your side of the board. There's a lot of really cool usefulness for a new adventure. The problem is that good decks are good, and this card makes those good decks even better. Thankfully, it is double cunning, so a Boba command deck or anything that doesn't run double cunning is going to struggle to play this because it is a 4 cost. But at 4 or even 6 cost, this is still an incredibly good tool to allow yourself to get some extra benefits to your when played effects on your 6 costs or less, remove upgrades from your opponent's stuff, or save something that you need to save from damage. And all of those are really good. It's amazing for 2, it's okay for 4, and it's a struggle for 6, but still probably worth it in some decks that need to do it. Spark of Rebellion is being run in a bunch of villainy decks right now because it is good to strip a card out of your opponent's hand, even if you have to pay 4 to do it. A new adventure, same situation. Our second article preview card is a Vigilance card that I like a lot. This is Concord Dawn Interceptors. This is a 3 cost Vigilance Heroism space unit, only 1 power, 4 health, Mandalorian vehicle fighter. It has Sentinel. This unit gets +2/+0 while defending. This is an uncommon, number 42 out of SHD, 42 out of 262 in SHD. First of all, Fang Fighters, love them. I absolutely love them. There's a Lego Fang Fighter sitting in my display over on that side. I have 4 of the Fang Fighters when I was playing Star Wars X-Wing, packed away in a box somewhere. I'm a big Mandalorian fan. I don't know if you know this. Concord Dawn Interceptors is a very interesting card because it's technically understated for its actual cost, but it is overstated while defending, and because this is a Sentinel, your opponent has to attack it or eliminate it in another way. So obviously this thing gets taken down, it can get waylaid off the board, so you have to play it again. Dies to removal is a thing. We just have to deal with it, right? But if your opponent can't do anything with that, then they have to go through something that's going to be hitting them back for 3 when they only see 1, and they still have to clear the 4 health total off this Concord Dawn Interceptor. Much like other Mandalorian cards, this actually very much benefits from having a shield on it or having an upgrade, an experience token on it, because that allows you to get the extra power while defending. You're not going to be doing too many attacks with this, but that's okay. That's not the point of the Concord Dawn Interceptors. They intercept. They stop your opponent's ships from being effective in the space arena. So being able to have a Sentinel unit that has a Mandalorian trait, which means things like Armorer can throw shield tokens onto it, or other things can drop experience tokens because of that Mandalorian trait, you have a lot of interconnectivity in that theme in order to be able to make this a very powerful card that your opponent's probably going to be pretty scared of. I like this a lot. There's another leader we're going to see later that also synergizes with this and a couple of other cards. So we'll see how that ends up working when we come to that. But Concord Dawn Interceptors, you love to see it. On that same day, FFG went live with their FFG Live doing some Twin Suns gameplay, actually, which was a little bit surprising to me, but still fun nonetheless. And on top of that, we had 2 of the designers talking about the Shadows of the Galaxy set itself and some of the things that we've seen before and some of the things that are yet to come. We also got 2 previews on this stream, so we're going to go over those. One is MJ's favorite and one is Ryan's favorite. So let's start with the card that MJ liked a lot. We have here Kira playing her part. 4-cost Cunning Heroism ground units, 3 power, 5 health, Underworld. When played, look at an opponent's hand, then name a card. While this unit is in play, each card with that name costs 3 more for your opponents to play. This is a rare number 202 out of 262 in SHD. One point of note before we get into the actual card itself, this is not the same Kira art we've seen before, but this card in Cunning Heroism is a hand disruption player's dream, because what this does is that, much like Spark of Rebellion, you get to look at your opponent's hand, but instead of discarding a card, you can go, my opponent has this card in their hand. I don't want them to play that this round. I'm going to go ahead and call this card. Let's say Overwhelming Barrage. Let's say you play this as your 4. You call Overwhelming Barrage. Now your opponent's Overwhelming Barrage costs 8, which is huge, right? There's no way they're getting that into play while this is on the board, and then they have to spend other resources to take Kira off the board or just not deal with that in the turn. The idea of being able to look at your opponent's hand means that this card is actually a lot better than Regional Governor, because it does functionally lock out something that you know your opponent has. But in combination with Regional Governor, you can utilize that card to call something else to make it so your opponent can't play whatever it is that they want to play there. This is a very fun card for that card type, and I think this is going to be seen a lot of. I don't think you're going to see this too much in Out of Aspect. We'll see how well this works with some of the Cunning Heroism leaders. This may not be run with a Cunning leader. We might see this with a different leader, but I think ultimately this is actually going to be very good for the game moving forward, especially in those strategies of like, oh, my opponent's going to kill me with 4 of Cause. Well, I'm going to make it cost 6. Or my opponent's going to kill me with Overwhelming Barrage. Let's make it cost 8. And that's really good. That's going to keep some decks in check, but not all decks. Our next card is a card that Ryan likes, and it has a very interesting naming convention, which makes us question something else that was named. We have here Slaver's Freighter. Shout out to Tim Bunn for making me realize I am an absolute idiot. You know what I'm talking about. 5-cost Cunning Villainy Space Unit. 4 power, 5 health, Underworld Vehicle Transport. When played, you may ready another unit with power equal to or less than the number of upgrades on enemy units. This is a common, number 189 out of 262 in SHD. So if your opponent's playing a lot of upgrades, your Slaver's Freighter allows you to drop it into play and ready another one of your units that has power equal to or less than the number of upgrades your opponent has. Against the Mandalorian, who runs a lot of upgrades, or Chirrut, who also runs a lot of upgrades, this is actually going to be pretty cool. This is the YV666 Freighter. This is traditionally piloted by Trandoshans. We also have the Houndstooth specifically, which is noted to Bosk. I don't think we're going to see the Houndstooth. I think this is what we're going to be getting, but the naming convention here is Slaver's Freighter. That's Fire Spray, traditionally known as Slave 1, is not called that. But if Slave is a problem, why is this called Slaver's Freighter? I'm not going to go ahead and go on this tirade of things need to stay the names that they're going to be named. Fet's Fire Spray is fine. I grew up in an era where it was called Slave 1. We had cards that said Slave 1, but things have changed, so on and so forth. They want their cool guy to not be represented with that type of thing. That's fine. Bosk is a filthy lizard, and he deserves to have his thing called Slaver's Freighter. Who knows? Who cares? It doesn't actually matter. What matters is that this is a very cool unit that's going to see a lot of play in this set, but we'll see if upgrades remain viable And if they do remain viable, how long Slaver's Freighter stays in relevance in competitive play for Star Wars Unlimited. Remember, tokens, experience, and shield are considered upgrades. So if your opponent's got a bunch of units stacked up with those, this thing can ready one of your units that has a ton of power on it. Next up, we have 2 previews coming by way of Spice Squadron. We've got an event, we've got a unit. Let's start with this event. It's a famous moment in Star Wars. We have here, Give In to Your Anger, a 1-cost aggression villainy innate event. Deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. Its controller's next action this phase must be an attack action with that unit if able, and it must attack a unit if able. This is a rare number 144 out of 262 in SHD. This is a very, very strong card, but it has to be played in very, very specific moments. You could potentially use this as a 1-cost, 1 damage, clear something that has 1 health on the board, done. It could also be considered a shield clear if you're willing to take the sacrifice of the attacks. If you have a Sentinel on the board, give into your anger something, and then it has to attack into that Sentinel, and that's it. You have to make sure that you have the defenses ready to be able to deal with the thing your opponent is going to be attacking with. It does have to be an attack. You're not able to do something like Surprise Strike that allows you to make an attack. It has to be specifically an attack action. So you give into your anger your opponent's Bosk, let's say. Then your opponent's Bosk will take a damage and then plow into one of your units. If you have no units, it plows into your base because it must attack. If it's exhausted, then you don't have to worry about it, right? Because it's exhausted. Give Into Your Anger is a very powerful card, but it is one of those very powerful super niche tech cards. We're probably going to see a lot of initial use of it, but once people realize how specific you have to use it to make sure that it's viable, even at 1 cost, it's still one of those things that, while good, it has very specific uses, and those specific uses can't be done every single game. So, powerful card, great art here. Luke trying to beat up Vader. Should be interesting to see what people do with this going forward. The second card from Spice Squadron is a unit and doesn't have immediate uses right now, but that might change. We have Nima Outpost Constables. This is a 4-cost Vigilance ground unit, 2 power, 6 health, fringe traits, Sentinel keyword, common, 62 out of 262 in SHD. 4-cost, 2 power, 6 health Sentinel. Not really much to write home about. However, with the second leader that we've seen, this would potentially be a 3/7, depending on the resources you have available to do things. It's an interesting card. It's not super hyper specific, but when looking at cards, especially in Vigilance that have 2 power or less, the math on them changes with the leader we're going to see. I'm going to leave that at that. We'll talk about that later. And by later, I mean right now. Our next preview comes by way of the Unlimited FFG social accounts. This is our second leader preview for this past week, as of recording, obviously. This is a leader that I pretty much had assumed was coming based upon things we had seen before. I'm very excited to have her on the board. This is going to be my showcase chase. It won't necessarily be the deck that I immediately build because we have the Mandalorian to deal with, but I'm very excited to finally have one of my favorite Star Wars characters in Star Wars Unlimited, and she is here. This is Rey, more than a scavenger, our Vigilance Heroism common leader, number 004 out of 262. I actually didn't notice that when she first previewed. She has Force and Fringe traits. She has an action, pay 1 resource and exhaust the leader. Give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. That's what we were talking about before, 2 or less power. That's very important. Her epic action is a flip on 6 for 2 power and 6 health. Her leader ability, 6 cost, 2 power, 6 health, 4 fringe, blah, blah, blah. She has Restore 3, which is fantastic. On attack, you may give an experience token to a unit with 2 or less power. Rey is what we like to call the white weenie strategy, in that she plays a lot of little units that you end up buffing with her ability. You can't buff them too far, otherwise her own ability won't be able to help them. But I think a combination of little dudes and Force users is going to be a very popular strategy for Rey going forward. Another thing I just noticed is that her ability is, I knew it was on attack, but her ability is on attack, which means when she attacks, because she has 2 power, you can give her an experience token by itself, and then she becomes a 3 power attacker that also restores 3 damage from your base. I think this is a very strong leader that will only get stronger as we get better lower power cards. Things like Gentle Giant are already pretty good with Rey. The Nima Outpost Constables can be good. The Concord Dawn Interceptors are going to be really good. You're going to see stuff like Baze Malbus, who starts as 2 power that can get an experience token from Rey, and then pumps up higher with Grit. Grit is also pretty good to start off with. You do have the ability to pump these little units that allow them to get a little bit better. They can't go higher than 3 with her ability, but that's where you add other things that add experience tokens or power pumps to characters that you have on the board. I imagine that Rey is going to be run, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to try to run aggression, because there are a lot of those raid units that have 0, 1, and 2 power that can do a lot of damage. Cantina Braggart, it's a pretty good example. You've got the Partisan Insurgent, you've got the Benthic 2 Tubes. Those are going to be really good units to be able to utilize because they give other things raid, or they get extra raid based upon having other stuff on the board. Vigilance, aggression, heroism does get a pretty big pump with this leader, and I'm excited to see what other cards are in this set that are going to be viable with Rey, who is more than a scavenger. I love it. I'm very happy to see this card. I'm very happy to see that we're going to be, we got those sequel trilogy reps pretty early. Set 2 is a very, very nice way to see these characters, Kylo Ren and Rey, and I'm hoping we get to see more representation for the sequel trilogy moving forward. Next up, the Golden Dice Podcast boys asked us a very interesting question on Twitter. What would it take for you to play a 5-cost unit? FFG provided 2 5-cost units to the Golden Dice Podcast for them to discuss. Link in the description below to their video. Go check it out. But let's check these out right now. We have here the greatest pilot in the galaxy, Poe Dameron, quick to improvise, 5 power, aggression, heroism, ground units, 6 power, 6 health, resistance trait. On attack, discard up to 3 cards from your hand. For each card discarded this way, choose a different option. Deal 2 damage to a unit or a base, defeat an upgrade, an opponent discards a card from their hand. This is the legendary number 153 out of 262 in SHD. Well, Golden Dice boys, I think this is a great 5-cost card. A 6/6 for 5 is pretty good, but the ability to deal damage to units or the base, to defeat upgrades, and discard your opponent's cards from their hand is really, really strong. Combo this with Black 1, which in my opinion was the worst legendary in the last set, now actually has a lot of viability because Poe says, I'm going to discard a bunch of cards in my hand, and next round when I play my Black 1, I'm going to be able to drop up a bunch of cards to be able to use for my effect, and when Black 1 gets destroyed again, cards to my hand, and Poe goes, haha, ya-cha-cha. It is up to 3 cards, so you don't have to discard 3 each time. So if you want to attack and discard 1 card to deal 2 damage to a base or a unit, that's very viable. Poe Dameron is a nice toolkit card that goes in a lot of different decks. He is a great option to eliminate upgrades. He's a great option to eliminate 2 health or less units with his damage that's coming from him. He's also a 6 body with 6 power, just punching dudes to death or hitting the base with the speeders that he pilots. And then obviously hand control, another really important thing. I think hand control is going to be very, very popular in this next set because there's a lot of options to it. So be prepared to not have your options available more so than you already don't when you have control, just blowing up everything on your board. That said, legendary, very powerful. This is going to be a very viable card. Buy early, buy often. All right, so we've got a 5-cost ground unit. What about space? We have here the Adelphi Patrol Wing 5-cost Command Heroism Space Unit, 4 power, 6 health, New Republic, vehicle, and fighter. When played, you may attack with the unit. If you have the initiative, it gets +2/+0 for this attack. This is a common, number 101 out of 262 in SHD. Adelphi Patrol Wing is your fleet lieutenant in space, but instead of targeting specifically rebels, this can, you obviously, much like the fleet lieutenant, you could attack it with anything, but this gives you a power bonus if you have the initiative. So you end your previous round taking the initiative, and you begin your next round with the Adelphi Patrol Wing in space, and then attacking with another unit that also gets +2 because you have the initiative. Stack that onto any other initiative bonuses you might have based upon the cards that you have in play, and you can have a really big unit doing a big thing that you need to attack with at the beginning of the round. This is a very strong unit. Being a 4/6 in space for 5 is pretty decent stats. It's not going to get taken off the board by takedown. It does require something much larger to deal with it. Your opponent's not really going to be able to clear this with its smaller space units without having to do more, and it's also not going to be taking a lot of damage back from Bright Hope because it can at least deal a chunk of damage, and then you can use one of your smaller units to finish that off. Or if you have a 4-power unit in space already and you have the initiative, Adelphi Patrol Wing comes down, and then now that's a 6-power coming at Bright Hope, and that's cleared off the board. This is a fantastic unit. My only complaint is not really a complaint. I just wish it was Rebel, but it's fine. Not everything can be Rebel. As we move forward, we'll probably lose some of the rebel strategies for stronger cards that work just generally. So instead, like I said before, instead of being rebel unit, it's if you have the initiative, you get +2/+0. Different strokes for different folks. This is a fantastic card. And honestly, I think this is going to see a lot of play even in those big rebel decks because it's still attacking with a unit. And taking the initiative isn't necessarily a hard thing, especially if you're prepared to do this with this in your hand. Our next card here comes by way of FFG Socials again. Star Wars Destiny players might recognize this character. But for those of you that don't, this is Bazine Netal, Spy for the First Order. She was in The Force Awakens. 2 cost, cunning villainy ground unit, 1 power, 3 health, Underworld. When played, look at your opponent's hand. You may discard one of those cards. If you do, that player draws a card. It also has a smuggle cost of 4, a cunning, and a villainy. This is a rare, number 184 out of 262 in SHD. Bazine Netal is a great round 1 drop because it means you can knock out your opponent's most important card that they want to play that round, especially if you have the initiative. But even if you don't, you can knock out your opponent's card that they're going to want to play in the next round. Late game, if your opponent has fewer cards in their hand and fewer good options for them to be able to be successful with, you can use this at its smuggled cost. It's not going to do a lot in terms of damage or stick as a body on the board, but effectively 4 cost, pick a card out of your opponent's hand and discard it, then they draw a card. That is a really good move, but you're banking on the fact that they don't have something good off the top of the deck. So a good combination with this card is actually Grand Admiral Thrawn, because you can decide, cool, at the beginning of the round, I'm going to look at the top card of your deck and the top card of my deck. And if the top card of your deck is something that I want you to have, and I know there's also a card in your hand that I don't want you to have, Bazine comes down, discards a card, and now I know the card that just went to your hand. And that's a viable strategy for a card that is looking for more cards that help it with that strategy. Again, hand control is going to be super strong. Thrawn stonks might also go up because of that knowledge off the top card of the deck, which again, a combination of knowing your opponent's top card and your top card. When you smuggle this, you can also know exactly what card is coming to you with that Thrawn effect, and that's fantastic. There's a lot of really neat things here with this card. I think this is going to see a lot of play, especially again, we've talked about it a bunch this episode. A lot of hand control strategies are going to be very viable, and this is going to be one of those cards that does that. Our next 2 previews come by way of Holocron Card Hub. Links in the description below. This came very early on Monday morning, but these are 2 interesting cards we have here. Let's start with the units. We have here Rokai Gunship. This is a 2 cost aggression space unit, 2 power, 1 health, underworld vehicle fighter. When defeated, deal 1 damage to a unit or a base. This is a common, number 164 out of 262 in SHD. The Rokai here is a ship I've actually never seen before. I don't know what this is from. If you do, let me know in the comments below. This is a very cool ship because for 2, so your first round play, you can play a 2/1 that even if it dies, it's still doing 1 damage to your opponent's base or the unit that they have that's on the board. The super hyper speed aggression, just slam units down and go and go and go, much like Ruthless Gunslinger, I believe was the name of the card. When played, deal 1 damage to each base, those types of things. Those abilities are going to be really good for the strategy of just get units to the board to attack or deal damage in some way, shape, or form. Rokai fits that theme very well, and what this does is brings you 3 copies of a space unit that you can play that's still progressing your damage race, even if it itself never actually attacks. And that's very good. That's something that's going to be very important for those types of builds moving forward, because a lot of the control-based aspects are going to be making sure that you don't really have any options of getting your attacks in by defeating your units. Now, exhausting and returning these back to your hand, that's a problem, but at least you get to play them again. So, or if it's exhausted, it can attack on another round. Regardless, this is a fun little ship. I think this is probably going to see a lot of play in those low to the ground, which is funny for a space unit, attacks decks that want to just spam a bunch of units. The second preview from Holocron Card Club is an event, and it's a very strong event. We have here Triple Dark Raid, a 3-cost cunning villainy tactic event. Search the top 7 cards of your deck for a vehicle and play it, but the other cards on the bottom of your deck in a random order. It costs 5 less and enters play ready. Return it to its owner's hand at the end of the phase. This is a rare, number 194 out of 262 in SHD. First thing to note, a very heavily modified Lambda class shuttle along with some of those pirated starfighters we saw in the first set. I imagine this is probably from Resistance, but as I've never actually seen the entirety of Resistance, I don't know for sure. Comment below if you do. This is a very strong card. What this does is you search the top 7 cards of your deck, you play for free anything that costs a single card that costs 5 or less that's a vehicle. The vehicles that ended up being in this deck are going to be things like 7th Fleet Defender and Fett's Fire Spray. And the fact that you can triple Dark Raid into Fett's Fire Spray, attack, and then have that come back to your hand so you can attack again the next round with 0 repercussion is very, very, very strong. I think the one saving grace here is that there's just a critical mass of really good Cunning events that not every Cunning deck is going to be able to play all copies of it. So one thing a player is going to have to decide is, with their 15-ish events they want to play, are they going to go with a full package of 5 3-ofs, or are we going to do a couple of 3-ofs, a couple of 2-ofs, and a 1-of, and then other things on the sideboard? I think that's going to be a super important distinction when it comes to cards like these, and how valuable and how much you want to be able to play that Fire Spray or the 7th Fleet Defender to be able to do things like this. This also does help other vehicles that are not in Cunning, but you're going to be focused on Cunning because that's where it is. But throw out a Reinforcement Walker. Sure, it's going to cost you 6 total because the 8 from the Reinforcement Walker itself reduced by 5, but you have to pay 3 for this. But that's still pretty good because Reinforcement Walker, and then your next action you attack with it and you get that extra health back. So that's also still pretty strong going forward with this card. This is a very interesting card. It's probably going to see a lot of play, but again, as I said, critical massive events, how many of these get played and how many of these new really good events get played is going to be a very interesting deck building decision going forward. Our last preview of the week comes by way of the FFG socials all around, wherever you can find them. This is a big unit. It's another legendary. And I'm sure Nerd Parker will correct me if I'm wrong, this is our first double artist credit. We have here Dryden Vos, Offering No Escape. This is a 7-cost Cunning Villainy ground unit. 5 power, 7 health, Underworld, shielded, so comes into play with a shield. When played, choose a captured card guarded by a unit you control. You may play it for free under your control. This is a legendary, number 192 out of 262 in SHD. And you can see here the double artist credit. I apologize. I'm not even going to bother trying to say these names because of the fact that I'm going to screw them up. Right there, these are the names. Great art. Interesting double credit. Dryden Vos. Did not expect Cunning Villainy out of him because First Light was Vigilance, and the Hybalon enforcers were also Vigilance. I was expecting Dryden to be a Vigilance leader, or at least just Vigilance aspected for his leader or unit. The fact that he's Cunning means that that deck probably wants to be mostly Vigilance Cunning in order to be able to combine the grit strategy with the capture strategy and have Dryden Vos be your big finisher because of the fact that you can play a unit for free when this plays. This is a 7 cost. If you have a captured unit, double its costs, or double its effectiveness technically. This is a fantastic unit. 7 health is really good. It means that it's not going to be removed by a bunch of the easy to use removal pieces. Vanquish will obviously vanquish it. Waylay will obviously waylay it. Don't waylay this. Just don't do it. No good to be dead it. There you go. Now it's exhausted for 2 rounds. Ultimately, Dryden Vos builds you up to have capture something, then take the initiative, then on your next round play Dryden so you can play the captured card. It doesn't really matter what it is. No matter what it is, it's going to be a bonus effect based upon what you've got. And because Cunning does have a lot of really good capture abilities, there's a lot of different things that you can do to make it so that there's something neat coming down to be able to defeat your opponents. This card is scary. This card is very scary, but I think it also opens up a very interesting option for the Vigilance Cunning Villainy builds that want to work more off capturing than straight up defeating enemy units. So fantastic card, a 5/7 with shielded for 7. The stats don't lie, and the stats spell disaster for you at sacrifice. One last piece of information we have here is the Shadows of the Galaxy pre-orders went up. Check with your local game store to make sure you can secure your boxes of Shadows of the Galaxy for Star Wars Unlimited. I know I already have my stuff secured. But we got a piece of art here, much like we did a couple weeks ago when we saw the Lando and Boba leader, just like silhouettes and a couple pieces of information about it, their aspects. We have the same thing here for 2 new leaders. We also have another unit that we don't know exactly what it does. We can go through this art piece here really quick. We have here the big guy himself, Andor. We've got the armor. We've got rich reward. We have a unit here, which is known as the Phantom TIE Fighter. This is a stealth fighter that's supposed to be able to navigate through specific situations on spy missions. This is in Cunning. You can see with the yellow in its silhouette. And then our two leaders here are Han Solo as the common aggression heroism leader, since we know Bo-Katan is the rare one. Then we have Jabba the Hutt here as the command villainy rare leader, since we know Hondo is the common one and Gideon is the starter. So that's the information that we have here on those leaders. We also have, I'm pretty sure we've already seen a Cassian unit. If not, Cassian unit. Interesting stuff, nonetheless. Should be super fun. Han Solo is going to be very interesting as the common leader. It'll be very, people have been super hyped for Jabba. Most people were thinking Cunning, but Command I think also fits in, which is something we discussed a bit during the Spark of Rebellion preview season when we were expecting Jabba the Hutt to come down there, and we didn't, and we got Grand Admiral Thrawn instead. This is cool. I like it. It's art. Fantastic. On May 22nd, FFG Live came at us with a Twin Suns deck building tips and gameplay live stream. Xander, Ryan, MJ throwing down with the Twin Suns, duking it out to see who's the best Twin Suns player on that stream at that specific time. I'm not going to spoil the results of it, but it's going to surprise you. Not a lot of huge information about Premiere or Constructed, whatever you want to specifically call it. Lots of Twin Suns information. If that's your jam, go check out that stream, linked in the description below. Lots of cool information, some insights. One of the things that they talked about was a small amount of combinations of leaders were set for set one, but the combinations exponentially grow because we're getting 18 more leaders, and then you have to combine two, so on and so forth. Lots of different things that are coming out for Twin Suns, which is neat, but most of the player base right now at least wants to experience most of the Premiere stuff. So while the stream is fun and you should watch it anyway, it's mostly Twin Suns. We got the previews, talked about those already. Not a huge amount of information outside of that for Shadows of the Galaxy or the standard stuff, but it was fun nonetheless. So with that said, we're done. We got all the previews. I think I managed to clip this video down short enough. We're done. That's it. We out of here. Thank you very much for joining me, everybody. Do all the YouTube stuff. Subscribe to this channel. All that other things that you know you need to do. Appreciate each and every one of you. We'll see you next time for more previews. I would like to do some deck techs of leaders coming up once we get a large portion of the set. Just things that I think are going to be really cool. And again, be on the lookout for the new series featuring the Mandalorian from the starter. That's going to be closer to the release of the set 2 Shadows of the Galaxy, July 12th. I'm done. We out of here. Thank you very much for joining me. And with that, I will see you in the stars.